So in this module, Tony, we're going to get into risk assessment, right? This is a big topic. So love this graphic you put together. Let's talk about this for just a minute, the components, how they work, because we could spend 2 days just talking about this graphic, right? So I'll let you dive into it.
All right, very good. So Tom, what we find is that as part of business continuity, one of the steps you have to take is you have to do a risk assessment as part of your business impact analysis. So you have to understand your threat classes or all hazards. You have accidents, you have natural hazards and intentional acts. As an example of those, your risk may be associated with the fact that there's a lot of construction and somebody actually can excavate the electrical lines or gas lines that come by your facility. There also could be an accident related to an overturned tanker or a derailed train. Natural disasters, we all have had those, either ice storms, tornadoes, hurricanes. And then intentional acts are, can be domestic terrorism, international terrorism, and also can be individuals with an intent to enter a property and just commit burglary. But the fact is that you have to understand that. And then what you do is that, how would your assets be impacted by those threats? What's the weaknesses, the flaws? How can something be exploited? And then the consequences. How severe are those consequences? So if somebody decides to cut through your fence and the only thing you have in that particular area is something that is in huge crates and somebody really can't carry them off without the use of heavy equipment, then the fact is that the consequences probably are not going to be very high there, because the reality is even if someone gains access, they're not going to be walking away with anything of value. But if that same scenario were to happen and individuals were able to go in there and, let's say, take certain types of metals or whatever it is, or even be able to enter your building and conduct industrial espionage, the fact is that the consequences are going to be severe. So it's very, very important that when you perform these threat assessments, that professionals walk through these threats, vulnerabilities, and consequences. And you have to look at the entire facility. And then we also tell individuals that they have to look in a 3D format. It's not just what's on the surface that could be the threat. And I'll give an example. We've performed a risk assessment on an organization that wanted to identify international terrorism as something that they should be very, very concerned with as far as a threat. But in reality, the product that they manufactured is not something that would be a target by somebody with that type of intent. But what they overlooked is, to the rear of their property, they overlooked a very large, high-pressure natural gas line that was at the property, that if somebody were to dig into it, or if it was just to erupt because of corrosion, would impact their facility to a catastrophic degree. So what they did is that they made the mistake of focusing on one without really looking at what was the vulnerabilities and the capabilities of that particular threat. And they totally ignored the fact that they have to look in more of a 3D format. We also ran across a scenario recently where individuals and train tracks ran by their facility. They assumed that it was just train tracks that carried some raw materials that had no hazardous classification. As we got down into the evaluation of those tracks, we found out that the classes of material that were carried actually were of a hazardous nature. So they had to go back and they had to identify that as far as their threat, and then go back in and work the vulnerabilities and the consequences. And the entire plan had to be changed, altered because of that. So again, you have to understand that before you can identify the risk. And also, I want to say that when you do identify, you take all these these sections and you